So in the wake of the announcement today, and if you missed it, we're going to replay some of what several Canadian ministers said today. And the tariffs, now call them what you will, counter tariffs, retaliatory tariffs, but they're pretty wide-ranging. But before we even get to that and break that down, I wanted to chat with Barry Appleton, professor, international trade lawyer, co-director of the Center for International Law at New York Law School. He's also an adjunct professor at Wilfrid Laurier. First of all, Professor Appleton, thank you for the time. And let me kind of move from back to front. We find out, of course, a couple of days ago on the weekend, Mark Carney makes that address to Canadians explaining why Canada walked away from a trade deal with the U.S. And then today, just a couple of days later, here we are with those promised counter tariffs, and they are detailed today. I'd like just, if I could, your reaction overall. Let's start with, as I said, what happened 2 days ago, Canada walking away for this deal and what you think of that.
Well, look, Quebec is the hardest hit province in this country from the existing tariffs, right? The Trump tariffs that came in was about $7.7 billion, B with a bill, okay, of Quebec goods that are caught by these tariffs. But the point that most people don't really know is really what broke these talks down. And we now know it from a report that came out this morning in the New York Times, was really about the use of French language and limitations on Canadian sovereignty to regulate AI and things like that. And so in the final hours on Friday, the Americans asked Canada to drop Bill 109, which is a piece of legislation from Quebec about streaming platforms to be able to make the French language shows discoverable or to make it easier to find music that's in French rather than English. Not just available, it had to be findable, right? And that was something we gave away in the last trade negotiation. And when we negotiated the CUSMA, we gave away the power to do that. And so the Americans wanted to ensure that we would comply with what we had given away before, sovereign power given away, and they wanted to expand that. And Canada just said no. They said, Ottawa could have said yes, right? But it was a Quebec law. It wasn't Ottawa's law, and only Quebec could change it. So what we found ourselves in was this very strange thing that the Americans wanted not just dollars, but they wanted control. And that was, according to the Prime Minister, just the piece, the straw that broke the camel's back. It went too far. And so the reason we have our tariffs today is because the impact of those tariffs are already underway. And so once you understand the context, you start to understand what's going on. It's that the Americans had an economic deal, but they wanted more. And that's what the government couldn't give them.
All right. So you're basically highlighting a situation that I think most people thought, based on what we heard from the Prime Minister, actually happened. There was a deal in place. I remember we all talked about the fact that on Friday, Donald Trump actually tweeted on Truth Social that there was a deal. We're just waiting to dot some I's and cross some T's. Then the suggestion now is, if you just outlined, the U.S. kind of threw this in, if you will, at the last minute, and that was a deal breaker.
Right. Well, they threw a couple of these things. And by the way, they're not just throwing them in with Canada, but they're throwing them in, like right now they're having negotiations with Brazil. They're throwing them in with some issues going in with other allies. It's what I call the Pax Americana, that they want to be able to control certain things about your foreign policy, about your economic policy, about your data policy. But the thing about this was that we thought there was a deal. We thought this was done. We thought we were just going through the legal scrub to clean it up. And when the legal scrub came back, it wasn't what we thought it was. And then they threw on more. I think the reason they did that, it might not have been that Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, wanted to get rid of French. I think what he wanted to do was drive the Canadians into something that they couldn't accept to have them give up something else on cars. Have us give us something else up on aluminum and give up something else when it came to steel. But the government just said, look, that's enough. Like we made a mistake before with some terms in the CUSMA, okay? We had that provision that allowed the U.S. to be able to have a veto right, in essence, over our economic policy with China. That was we call it the poison pill. That was a big mistake, and it's been causing some aggravation. But this was even further. This was even more, and I think they just said that enough's enough. Mm-hmm. But no one was ready for that, right? Everyone thought we had a deal. And so now the question is, since the tariffs hit us, And they hit us hard. And they've hit, in Quebec, they hit in autos. They hit in steel. They hit in aluminum, massively in aluminum, and in softwood. And now the new tariffs hit even further. So that's why the government had to do something today.
I want to go back to what you started with Quebec. I don't think we perhaps at the outset realized just how significant Quebec was in Canada walking away from this deal. And as I hear you describe it, some people say, is this really just about Netflix? Is that what this deal was all about, that we walked away from with respect to the French language? So can you detail what it actually did involve?
Yeah, of course. So the Netflix issue was really about control of AI. You see, if you want to tell Netflix that they have to change the way their algorithm works, we gave up that power in the CUSMA. In the CUSMA, we gave up a large number of economically sovereign powers and from Parliament. Canadians didn't really understand what we gave up. And when we did sign that agreement, the digital economy was a lot smaller than it is today, right? And we are, by the way, the largest customers of the United States when it comes to digital, when it comes to content, when it comes to streaming. So you kind of think you don't want to piss off your biggest customers, right? That's usually a bad idea. And that's certainly what Brand America is going down. We see that all over. But here, by this issue about what's going on, which was about some streaming and a little bit about some money, it really was about who gets to regulate AI. And the Americans do not want anyone to regulate AI but them. They have a policy paper on it. They have an AI action plan, and they have a U.S. national security strategy, and it outlines how central U.S. domination and control of AI has to be. And we walked into that. So the French language was a piece, but the AI was a piece, but the Quebec bill was a central piece. And they have been talking to us, and they've been writing about it, and they've been dealing with this for over a year. So we knew it was coming, but we didn't expect it to blow up this discussion. We expected it would be a hot issue in the CUSMA, but it was a red line for Quebec. Quebec made it absolutely clear they could not sign on if that was the case.
Okay.
And that was our problem.
If I can go then fast forward to what we found out today, these counter tariffs that were announced today in a variety of sectors, and of course support as well in unemployment insurance, et cetera. And give me your reaction to that, because it seems, this didn't happen in 2 days. The government was obviously prepared at some point with these plans, should the deal not have worked, which it didn't. What did you make of what you heard today?
Okay, so look, today was about what Canada wants to do. 700 items in terms of retaliation, when it would be, how it would be, different layers, strategically focused. And even more important, the support so that the country can continue to run. Because I think these tariffs are going to last for some time. But here's what's missing, okay? If you want to engage in this type of issue, and you know now that the world has changed, the Prime Minister says the world has changed with how it is with the United States, you got to build the capacity and the resiliency to actually have a country. And that means that we have to invest specifically in the types of things so that we have our own economic drivers in this country, so that A, we're independent, so that we have the capacity if we're cut off from various goods or they're priced out of our way. And then we need the ability to be productive enough to be able to sell them to other countries. Because we usually sell in the United States because they're close. It's just the transport cost and our lower dollar that made it work. But not because we were more innovative, not because we had products that were more productive. That's what you need if you want to sell to Europe or you want to sell to Asia. And so that's what we need to start now. We need to start that building. And that's the part we haven't done here. We haven't done the building. So today's good, okay, absolutely essential. The support, essential if we want to be able to keep the country together, keep our people going, because there are going to be an economic body count, for sure. And Quebec is going to feel it the most. But then we need the next piece.
I have to wrap up. I would ask you, best guess from you. You know that the U.S. tariffs, the second round, are not supposed to go into effect till Jan 1st. You know the Canadian tariffs announced by the Prime Minister. There's a couple of weeks, September 8th, the day after Labor Day, before that would kick in. Do you imagine that talks will resume between now and then?
No. I think there's no scheduled on-ramp. It plays for the Americans in the midterms, actually, to let this go and to fight with Canada, and there's going to be more pressure on Canada. So I don't see it. That's the problem. This wasn't designed. We didn't design this for a trade war with on-ramps and on-ramps. None of that's there. So our problem is we need to hunker down and be ready for months, and it may even be longer than that. And that is a very bad situation, and I expect it to get worse from the American side before this gets better.
Leave it at that. Professor Appleton, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Very much appreciate it.
Aaron, thanks for having me on the show.
Hello, Canada.
This is Bryan Adams Radio, hosted by Bryan Adams himself.
We'll play a few of mine, a ton of my favorites, and some must-hear behind-the-scenes stories from the world of rock and roll. One thing about doing rock and roll so long is you end up meeting a lot of the people that you admire. Sometimes you even get to work with them.
It's only love, and that's all. Bryan Adams Radio. I'm coming back to you. Now available on the free iHeartRadio app. Everybody